How's it going, everyone? Geeky Gambit here, and welcome back to the channel for another Titans Season 3 breakdown. In this video, I'll be going over both episodes 2 and 3, pointing out some of the more important scenes, and also showing you some of the Easter eggs you might have missed. Alright, so right off the bat, we got the introduction of Red Hood, and it was almost a shot-by-shot depiction ripped straight from the Under the Red Hood animated movie. The Red Hood gathers up all of the crime bosses into one spot and basically shows them who's the real boss now. And I love this because this scene and really the whole episode is really showing us just how credible the Red Hood is as a threat. He really ain't playing around this episode. After this, we get Dick arriving at the GCPD, and Barbara explains to him that they captured an Ann Williams after she has blown up several civilians while wearing a red hood. Anne refuses to talk to the GCPD and only gives them a note that says, "I need to talk to Nightwing." I would like to point out that Barbara also mentions during this scene that the Joker actually started out his criminal career also wearing a red hood and going by this name. Point this out because this also sort of implies as to why Jason has chose to pick up this moniker of the Red Hood, so it's very interesting to me. During the interview, Anne actually ends up snapping her own neck due to being too much pain. And I'd be lying to you if I said I saw this coming. I was definitely shocked when I saw this, and I'm really curious to hear what all of you guys have to say about how you feel about how really dark they are making this interpretation of the Red Hood. Do you think he has any sort of chance of being redeemed by the end of this season? Because I'm not so sure. But moving on, we find out that Anne had a subdermal drug implanted inside of her, causing her all of that pain. So once again, we get to see some of the chemistry knowledge that Jason has picked up in these past couple months. After this, Barbara tells Dick that for these type of cases, they have been working with a consultant, and the consultant of course ends up being Scarecrow. Now what's really interesting about this is because she also says that this whole consultant idea with Scarecrow was Bruce's idea, which sort of implies that depending on how long that this consultant relationship has been going on, it stands to reason that Jason probably also knew about this, so that could be his sort of connection towards Scarecrow and maybe the drug as well, or at the very least explain his newfound obsession with chemistry. We then flash back to Wayne Manor and we see Starfire looking around Jason's room before having another out-of-body experience, this time where she freaks out speaking Tamaranian and actually attacks Gar and Superboy before snapping out of it. Now Starfire had one of these moments in the previous episode as well, and I didn't really want to speak on it because I wasn't sure how I could explain my thoughts without spoiling this specific scene. If I had to guess, it seems like Starfire is having some sort of mental connection with her sister Blackfire. Now we know at the end of season 2, Blackfire tells Starfire that she's coming to Earth to get her. And it seems like she's already made it to Earth and somehow has managed to get herself captured. This really stood out to me because during this scene we see a vision through someone else's eyes of someone being dragged through a hallway and, kind of freaked out while they're on a gurney. And they're also, what I noticed is that they're wearing white garb, and the connection to Blackfire as they are related, and on top of that, during one of the previous trailers, we did see Blackfire wearing that same type of white full garb. In the next scene, we find out that this version of Crane is a huge stoner, and he asks for weed as payment for his help from Dick. Now I think the reasoning they gave for this was actually a pretty great one, how basically his mind is constantly running and he needs the weed to kind of like calm it down. And I like this because it shows how smart Crane actually is, as opposed to like, they didn't just make him a creepy weirdo, and I thought that was cool. Flash forward a couple scenes after the Titans believe they figured out the Red Hood's plan. Dick receives a phone call from Barbara about a bank robbery in progress with the robbers all wearing red hoods. Once arriving at the scene, Dick is able to convince Barbara to let the Titans handle this situation because he once again believes that they are actually just parents forced to do the Red Hood's bidding. We quickly find out, however, that this is not the case and they actually are just a bunch of robbers and gang members, and they end up using the surprise to get the jump on them and throwing a bomb and basically blowing out the front end and being able to escape with, I think it was 27 million that they got away with. This of course causes Barbara to kind of lash out at Dick and freak out for letting them get away, and we kind of see them in a little fight and a little bit of a ex-lovers quarrel, if you will, and I think throughout this season we're going to get little tiny bits and pieces more information about their past together. This is where we get the final scene of the episode, where after using the information that they've gathered from Scarecrow and Beast Boy's big brain, they are able to track down the Red Hood's actual location. During this, we get a pretty epic battle between Nightwing and Red Hood, as well as a couple other fights from the Titans as well. And one of the things I would like to point out is also during this scene, you can see Superboy is wearing his traditional 80s style black leather jacket, obviously reminiscing his 80s look from the comics. During the battle between Nightwing and Red Hood, I love how they show that Nightwing is actually the superior fighter in this situation, so much so that the first words that Red Hood says without the voice modulator is, oh, Bruce always did say that you were the better fighter. And I love how that was also kind of the line that reveals that he is Jason. Now, I'm actually pretty glad that they didn't drag out this reveal for too long, because I feel like the majority of fans already knew that Jason Todd was Red Hood, so I don't think it would be necessary for them to drag it on for an entire season for something that we already know. You can make the argument, however, that the Titans themselves shouldn't have found out until later on, and you would have a valid argument in that situation, but the way that I look at it is I'm ready to get this ball rolling. I'm ready to get to the action, the juice. They don't need to be searching for the identity of Red Hood this entire season, in my opinion. Alright, moving on to episode 3. There's really only a couple things that I actually want to point out before moving on to the bomb drop of an ending of this episode. First up is the name drop of Raz Al Ghul. For those of you who do not know, Raz is the reason for Jason getting resurrected in the Under the Red Hood animated movie. They do seem to only nod to this though, however, because right after mentioning it, Dick says, oh, it can't be Raz because Raz is in Kadeem. So I don't think it's very likely that Raz is the one that resurrected Jason in this situation, but it is still a possibility. It is on the table. Granted, it has a very low chance of being the case. Another thing I would like to point out is I love how they finally depicted Superboy's intelligence during this episode, giving us a reminder that he's not just a Clark Kent clone, but also a Lex Luthor clone. Granted, obviously, they couldn't do too much of this in Season 2, considering he was straight out of the test tube, if you will. So now that it's a little bit farther in his life, I think it's awesome that we're finally seeing his intelligence as well. Now, I think it's safe to say that the real highlight of this episode was Hank. The performance that Alan Ritchson gave, and kind of during all those final goodbye moments that he had with the rest of the Titans, was really heartfelt and really amazing. Before this episode, Hank really wasn't my favorite Titan. He was one of my least favorite Titans. But the writers and his performance during this episode did a lot to change that for me. By the end of this episode, I was really hoping oh man, no, don't do it. It can't happen. I don't want it to happen. But of course it did. I'm really curious to see how Dove is going to act in the next following episodes. If you think about it, it's really one of two ways. She's either going to collapse and kind of retire and leave the Titans out of the guilt that she now feels, or she's going to turn this guilt into anger and lash out and want to attack Red Hood. I'm personally hoping for the latter, because I think it would be very interesting to see how things play out. If Jason does end up having some sort of redeeming arc through the eyes of the rest of the Titans, I don't think Dove will be able to see that. I think she will still be nah, I'm gonna kill him. So I'm really curious to see what kind of interactions that will bring, considering she very well may be the only Titan who's not willing to forgive him for all the things that he's done. Now, I don't want to get anyone's hopes up, but right after this episode, I did kind of had a feeling that maybe Hank was going to get resurrected. And that's kind of for two reasons. One is for the name drop of Raz Al Ghul, which could have some sort of connection later on in the season. And two is also a couple months ago, we did get a leaked set photo where Hank is actually fighting side by side with Tim Drake. And obviously we didn't get that yet, so it stands to reason that we might see that later down the road. However, after doing a bit of research, I did find out that Alan Ritchson is actually working on another Amazon show, so there could be a possibility that he actually ended up having to get killed off in Titans due to maybe scheduling conflicts or something like that. Alright, moving forward, these breakdowns will be coming out the day after every Titans episode, so be sure to subscribe so you never miss one of those. As usual, thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy this video, leave a like, and I'll catch you guys all next time. Peace out.